Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Denise Amber Lee Foundation Be the Difference virtual conference powered by Within the Trenches Media. My name is Nathan Lee. I'm the president and founder of the Denise Amber Lee Foundation, and I'm really excited to be with you today with Agency 360, Matthew Moulter and Steve Kellums, who are going to do a presentation called Toxic Employees and How to Improve Their Performance. Matthew, you and I met, I think it was 3 years ago or so. I think it was a NINA conference in San Antonio, and we've kept in touch. You guys are doing some awesome things at Agency 360, and I can't thank you guys enough for being a silver sponsor for the first ever Be the Difference conference. Gentlemen, how are you both doing today?
Yeah, doing good. Likewise. I mean, you guys are doing some amazing stuff too.
Oh, well, thanks, man. Listen, it's all for the 911 folks out there, and just like you guys, we're just doing everything we can to help. But again, thank you guys so much for doing this session, and I'll let you take it away.
All right, thanks, Nathan. So, toxic employees and how to improve their performance. I think everyone should stick around. As a special gift to the Denise Amber Lee Foundation, we have some giveaways for the attendees that follow along with the presentation here. So make sure you stay till the end. There's some giveaways there. A few introductions. I guess I'll go first since I'm already talking. Matt Moulter, founder of Agency 360. We're trying to make public safety a great place to work and give you the tools to do that. And honored to have Steve Kellums here as well. So.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, my name's Steve Kellums. I'm actually retired police officer, did 30 years in law enforcement. And now I kind of travel around the country and train other law enforcement agencies about a variety of topics, everything from training to some leadership topics and investigative and public information topics. And the thing I do on the side is host Blue Canary podcast, which is a new love of mine. So I've been spending some time doing that as well, particularly with the pandemic and those kinds of things, but having a great time traveling around and teaching people and talking about a variety of topics.
And I mean, just like me, when I worked on the police department, we spent significant time having to work dispatch. You similarly had a number of years where you were.
Well, yeah, when I first started, I went to Indiana University, just like you did, and they have a great program, this law enforcement police officer program. And I went through that program. Well, part of that was doing dispatch. So I spent about 2 years while at IU doing a lot of dispatch work. I actually really kind of enjoyed that portion of the job, particularly at IU, when as far as the law enforcement side, it was more security based. And then once I left IU, I took a job with the local city police department, Bloomington Police Department in Bloomington, Indiana, where I did 27 and a half years. My last 3 years, I retired as the administrative captain for the department. So I had a variety of jobs that I had to do, everything from internal affairs investigations to public information officer. But I also supervised the central dispatch, our central dispatch. And the good thing is I had a great central dispatch manager who handled all of that stuff for me. So I didn't have to get into the weeds with the dispatch, but I just had to deal with some of the bigger personality issues that may have popped up, mostly, the leadership and supervision side of it. So I've got some experience with dispatch. I've got some, I've had some interactions with dispatchers over the years, and it's been very interesting.
Yeah, they're a great group, but unique challenges too.
Well, absolutely. It's always been interesting to me for those dispatchers, particularly from the law enforcement side. We're so used to going out and solving these problems, whereas the dispatcher has to, give us the information to go, and then a lot of times they have to wait for the outcomes. And I don't know that I could do that.
Let alone manage all those monitors.
Absolutely.
And multitask so well. But I mean, similarly, I think the whole reason why we're here is they, just like any, I guess, organization, they have toxic employees.
Yes, they do. We all have toxic employees, unfortunately.
Yeah, and if we're trying to create this great culture of this place to work, we need to figure out how to deal with that. And, because it's going to happen. I mean, I guess you would say it's going to happen everywhere, right?
Absolutely. And you unfortunately, you can't get away from them. We have a tendency to sometimes create them ourselves. And so understanding what they are is kind of really important. I mean, first off, when we talk about toxic employees, you're talking about those people very negative, right? They're always blaming others for their problems, and they rarely hold themselves accountable. And these are also the first people that will stand there and they'll know the policies. They'll jump up and down on the tables and complain about their rights, but they also know those policies so that they can avoid doing a lot of things or not doing things correctly or properly. A lot of times they can be good employees, particularly when we start talking about the different types. Some of your toxic employees are really hard workers, but their attitudes and relationships are so terrible. And of course, what makes them toxic is that pervasiveness, that kind of bickering, that backstabbing, creating these negative bonding issues in which people start getting together or grouping up to cause specific problems in the workplace. And I don't think they typically go to work at the beginning thinking they're going to do all these things. But dealing with the type of environment that we're in, it can be very toxic and very stressful. Some of the times the way in which they respond to that stress causes these things to happen. And sometimes the way in which we as supervisors or leaders have kind of made these things happen. Again, I call them the nasty little backstabbers because they do have a tendency to just sabotage everybody else's work. These are the people that are spreading the rumors. They're bad-mouthing everybody else. And they love to do what I call malicious obedience. Malicious obedience is when you follow the rule, particularly when you know that rule is going to cause trouble. Love the fact that rule is going to cause trouble. And, sometimes you want to point that out maybe or make a point, but generally you just sit back and these toxic employees will sit back and smile that they've created so much problems just by following the written rule.
A lot of faces are coming to my head.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. When I travel around and I talk about these things, it's really easy to put names to them, right? It's very easy to look at some of these people and put specific names. I was talking to a class about a month or so ago, and we were talking about the toxic employees. And as I was breaking these down and talking about them and giving some specific examples from my experience, many of these people were like, "You're looking in my windows." I've got a name. That's my entire shift, and yeah, these are the kind of people that we typically deal with a lot. And like I said, we'll get into some of the specific types here later. But you're looking at that employee that sometimes, like I said, sometimes they're a hard worker, but a lot of times they've got that woe is me mentality, or everything is focused around me. And that doesn't really bode well, particularly in a dispatch situation in which you have to work as a team. Even the smaller dispatch or central dispatch agencies where the dispatcher is doing everything from answering the phones to dispatching all of the units, you still got those other dispatchers. You have to work as a team. You have to share information. And when you don't feel like you can trust the guy sitting next to you, you don't feel like you can share information with the dispatcher next to you, you're not going to be able to accomplish anything. And that's where we start seeing breakdowns within the entire system, is at the personal level. And when we talk about all these programs and issues and we add things, we tend to ignore the personal level. And so I think that's where we have to focus on. And toxic employees is probably the first and most important thing to focus on when we talk about the personal level.
Okay, so I'm hearing this and I'm like, okay, toxic employees are bad. Why don't they just identify it and fire them?
Well, we'll talk, in some instances, you probably need to fire them, but not all of your toxic employees need to be fired. And because they were good performers at one time, or they can be good performers again if we can properly handle the issues that are going on. I think the biggest problem that we have with these employees not being dealt with is that oftentimes the bosses don't see it. One of the things toxic employees learn really early on is relationships. So what they'll do is they'll identify the important person in the room, whether it be the boss or the supervisor. Sometimes it's not even the boss or the supervisor. It's that super or that other employee that tends to lead, that informal supervisor. They'll identify the important person in the room, and that's who they make friends with. That's the person that they'll want to become important to. They'll spend a lot of time talking to them. If you, as a dispatch supervisor, have a dispatcher that tends to want to spend a lot of time in your office talking to you about things, they'll try to identify what your goals are, what your hobbies are, and they will miraculously have the same hobbies, and they'll start talking to you about those. They build these really good relationships with the bosses. And then when the other employees come to the boss and say, look, this person's causing all these problems, the boss will be like, they just had a bad day, or that's not, they don't do that, or I'm not really sure. So they really do a good job of hiding. Because again, building those relationships, they understand when to tear those down. Now they treat all the other employees very differently, right? They treat the other the employees that they see as peers. Actually, they don't see that they have peers. They see that they're above everyone else, and they treat them pretty poorly, except for those supervisors. And recognizing how they interact with them are really important. You'll also be able to tell when the supervisor walks into the room. They'll stop acting the way they were. They'll start performing or behaving better. And so most of the time when we say, why won't the boss deal with it? The boss just doesn't see it. Yeah. Now, another problem we have is bosses are afraid of them. When we start talking about toxic employees, a lot of times they're very, very good at understanding the policies and the procedures. Maybe they've dealt with HR quite a bit in the past, and they understand things like FMLA and HR and where those complaints go. They love to file complaints outside of that. So bosses sometimes will be afraid of them. They'll be afraid of the lawsuit that might come up. Although I was told a long time ago by an attorney friend of mine, he said, you're going to get sued for something, pick it. Yeah. Well, I'd much rather pick getting sued for terminating a toxic employee than getting sued because the actions a toxic employee took that caused somebody else to get harmed. And so bosses shouldn't be afraid of them, but they are. And so they don't see it. They don't recognize it. They have these organizational allies. Many times the friendships they make aren't with the immediate boss either. Right. So, if as I was a captain in charge of our central dispatch, in charge of a big portion of our police department, if it wasn't uncommon for dispatchers to try to make friends with me and go around the central dispatch manager, the one who was actually in charge of their day-to-day performance. They would, spend time going around them, coming directly to me to talk about things. And then when they had problems, they would skip over their immediate boss. So those are all types of issues that we have with not identifying, not recognizing that boss is not seeing just how detrimental and toxic the employee really is. And all of those are reasons why we end up, not taking any action against them.
Gotcha. So I guess next is we're going to talk about how to identify the toxic employees. So this would be for supervisors or just for anybody? Like how do you recognize what's going on in the workplace?
Well, I think it's for anybody because, again, we start talking about toxic employees. You start looking at toxic employees. One of the ones we talk about sometimes is called the hot mess. That toxic employee is the one they're just incompetent. They don't know how to do it. That identifying that's pretty easy from the other peer employees, the ones who are sitting next to them every day. They see that. So you're going to see those, that performance from that peer, from somebody who's recognizing it happening, seeing it happening, and they might, they're the ones that might try to tell the supervisor. Now, the immediate supervisor can see them as well, but again, generally because they try to build these relationships with them, the immediate supervisor misses it. So identifying them is one of the biggest things. One, step back and really take a look at the performance of your employees. Try to take that the personality out of it, whether or not they're your friends, and I think I worked at a small enough agency, we had about 100 officers. And so recognizing that there were a lot of people that worked for me that were my friends, but at the same time, they've got to do their job. And I had a lot of conversations where it would be, this is not about, you and me. This is about your job at this department and what you're doing or not doing. And I think as supervisors, you just kind of have to get good at that. You have to get good at separating the personal from the workplace. And if you can do that, you'll start identifying these guys and also keeping your ears open to what's being said by the other employees, the other peers that work with them on a daily basis. Those are all really critical to making those identifications and recognizing who they are. And like I said, when we start talking about some of the specific types, you'll immediately see what those are like.
Yeah, we gave a little hint with my terrible button pushing here. And there's a bunch of these, but we're just going to focus on 3, right?
Yeah, there's usually about 5 types, and you can go and find us talk about some of those others. But I think today we'll just focus on of 3 types: the martyr, the gossip, sometimes called the socialite, and then the bullies. And I think these are 3 pretty important ones to focus on because the way in which you kind of deal with them. Now, let's talk about the martyr first of all.
We're gonna pause.
Let's not.
Before you go into the martyr, we got giveaways. We got to make this presentation fun. I appreciate all that the Denise Amber Lee Foundation is doing. So first, we're going to ask, how does your agency currently manage toxic employees? So now we know what they are, and you can start to identify them in your head. If you want to email support@agency360.com, you're already in front of your computer already. So switch over to your email client, type in support@agency360.com. And how does your agency currently manage toxic employees?
Do they get bonus if they say they don't? Because that's going to be the most responses, right?
That's fine. That's fine. And whatever you say automatically enters you. And $25 Amazon gift card, I think, is the giveaway here. So, all right. Sorry, Steve. Back to the martyr. Back to the martyr.
The martyr. Yeah. Yes. The martyrs are so much fun. And which is why I love this little meme here about the martyr. Yeah, they're so much fun. So when we talk about the martyr, the recognizing that the types of employees and what we're really talking about here is, the martyr at the very beginning looks like the boss's dream. They look like the perfect employee. They're very hardworking. They generally have no problems taking responsibility. Sometimes the first ones to jump in, particularly when there's change or other issues that need to take place. So originally, when you look at the martyr, you really, you appreciate them. They're high performers at your agency. So how do they end up being a martyr? Well, this is also this high employee, the one that's the first to get everything done and the hardest worker there, the first one in every day and the last one to leave every day. They're also the first one in your office complaining about everybody else. Nobody else is competent. Nobody else is capable. They're the only ones that can get anything done. If it wasn't for them today, this would have failed miserably. They saved the day, and they saved the day on more than one occasion. They saved the day by answering the phones, and they have to dispatch everyone, and they have to, they had to take over this call because someone else wasn't capable of doing it. And again, the first couple of times they'll come into your office and have those discussions, you'll think, okay, well, they're really trying to help and make this place better. But you'll start quickly realizing that it's all about them. They're what's important. You have to realize as the boss that they are what makes this place run. And without them, everything is going to fail. And they're going to make sure you know that. The other thing is that they have to do everything themselves. These people, they don't delegate. They do a terrible job of helping other people do the job. See, they have to do everything. They're the ones that push everybody out of the way. It's like our kids, right? When you tell your kid to unload the dishwasher and you come, you leave the room and you come back and you open up one cabinet and all the cups, all the glasses, all the plates are crammed into one little corner of a cabinet. And you're like, that's not how you unload the dishwasher. And they say, well, I didn't know any better, right? See, they're hoping that you will be like, well, I'll do it next time because you don't do it right. We learned that as kids. I remember as a 16-year-old having to mow the yard, right? And I did this terrible job. The lines weren't perfect. So my dad would be yelling at me about mowing the yard because my lines aren't perfect. And pretty soon I don't have to mow the yard because I didn't make perfect lines. I could make perfect lines. I just didn't want to mow the yard. And I figured if I screwed it up, then they wouldn't let me do it. And that's kind of what we're talking about here with the martyr a little bit is you know how to do this job and they're the only ones that can do it and they immediately take it away from anybody else. So they're kind of like the dads or the parents in that regard, right? Mm-hmm. In that any simple mistake or problem, or even if it's not just absolutely perfect and mowing within the lines, they're the ones that are going to take that over. And they have to let everybody know about their sacrifice. Again, once you recognize that even though they're a high performer, you'll see them pretty quickly because everybody gets to know just how bad it is. They definitely have control issues, right? They're working so hard to prove themselves. They're really challenged. And this brings about, we talk about imbalance to the team here. What we're talking about here is that what adults resent and resist situations in which others impose their will. It's part of being an adult, and it's part of the concept of self-responsibility that all adults have. So when other people start imposing their will on them, many people will simply kind of step back and be like, fine, you do it. And that's where the martyr takes advantage of all the other teammates, is that the martyr steps in, the martyr starts doing all these barking orders, telling everybody what to do. And the rest of the group says, fine, you know what? You want it? It's all yours. And as soon as they do that, that's when you start seeing that team breakdown. Then it becomes no team. It just becomes the one martyr. And it reinforces the martyr himself, right? Because now he's proven that he's needed, because nobody else is actually doing anything, because they're tired of him taking over and doing everything. And so ultimately, the real problem with the martyrs, you have a very hard worker who's very capable, but because of this attitude and relationships with the other employees there, will very quickly burn out. And you'll see them stop working or leave the agency, or maybe even turn into some, one of the other toxic employees known as the slacker, where they actually just stop doing things because, well, I mean, if nobody's going to support me and I have to do all the work anyway, then fine, I just won't do it at all. Yeah. And so that is typically the martyr. And probably most people listening have identified at least one of those in every single workplace.
Yeah. I mean, to be frank, I see a little bit of myself in that too. Like you can see, control issues.
well, welcome to public safety, right? Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much control. We're all control freaks to a certain regards, but the thing is
finding that balance, right?
That's right. It's the balance. It's the teamwork. And I think when we start talking about, how do you fix it, or how do you deal with the martyr? You have to start looking at ways to move them away from the I'm the one that's important. Move them away from the superstar. Start building teams, and I think that's the really important part about how to solve the martyr. I think if you move to the next slide, try that one. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, I think we'll skip that one. Yeah.
Yeah. I did a long introduction which covered 2 slides there in one, but when we talk about the martyr, you've really got to start building the teams and making the martyr realize that there is no winner here, that we all win or lose together. And that's really important as a leader, is start, fostering that collaborative rather than the competitive. And the other thing is you got to get them out of the office. I mean, particularly I know that most of your central dispatches are really short. A lot of them are running, mandatory overtimes, and these are the things that the martyr tends to do a lot, right? They're grabbing these constantly and doing that. They're taking all the overtime they can, because again, remember, in the martyr's head, the place doesn't work without them. Well, what they have to realize is that when they leave, the place still goes on. I mean, one of the biggest lessons I had to learn as a police officer early in my career was that when I went home, everything stayed, everything kept going, nothing stopped. You get this feeling like you're the only one that can make things work, and you have to get the martyr to recognize that everything still works when they're not there. So get them to take their time off. Mandatory time off, I think, is probably a good thing to start enforcing, and making sure these guys take some time off, take some vacations. Also enforcing delegation. Now, if you've got a team effort, maybe you can work this person into being some kind of a leader of a team or a group, and then have that group can kind of reinforce what their expectations are, or what they should be doing by working within that team. And by far, I think that's the biggest one. And finally, like I said, enforcing delegation, making sure that that person isn't doing everything. This works really well in central dispatch, bigger dispatch groups and agencies in which you've got a specific job role for everyone, where you've got a call taker and you've got the dispatcher. This kind of works pretty good, because they tend to have to work in a team, and forcing that person to take on every different role within that dispatching center to get used to all those roles can be really helpful. The problem is the smaller dispatch centers, in which you have the one person doing everything, is when this person really feels like they're the person that makes it happen. So recognizing that they have to, bounce calls off of different people. If one of your consoles is simply running EMS, and another console's running fire, and another one's running law enforcement, move them around in those, because they will get in their head that this console, this is the law enforcement one's the only important one, the rest isn't, or the fire is the only important one. Make them do all of that, and that helps start building that teamwork within them. And again, if you have any type of competitive, stat-driven evaluations, the martyrs are going to glom onto that, and they are going to love that. Stop it. Get rid of that, especially when you have martyrs in your unit, because excuse me, because they have to start recognizing how the team functions.
Or make that an important measure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Measuring,
Yeah,
right?
looking at measuring that teamwork, absolutely, and that can help push the martyr.
All right, so martyr, I think definitely can imagine a couple people there. The next one is the gossips or the socialites.
Well, and of course I laughed as soon as this popped up, right? I even knew it was coming, and it makes me laugh. Don't worry, your secret is safe with me. Everyone I told swore they wouldn't tell anyone. That's just phenomenal. Yeah, the gossips or the socialites. That's the next group that we want to talk about with our toxic employees. Now, as soon as we call them a gossip or socialite, you get a pretty good idea who we're talking about here, right?
Yeah.
But there's actually a little more that goes on here. Again, recognize relationships are so important, and that the people that they work with are not nearly as important as the bosses. This is the person that really becomes the boss's best friend. They're going to find, if the boss is into fantasy football, that's all they care about. If the boss likes, if the boss likes cooking shows, then they're going to talk about that all the time. This is the one who, instead of sitting at the console, is standing over talking to the other dispatchers. They're distracting from the other people trying to do this job. This is the one that has to take the bathroom break every 7.5 minutes, and then it takes them about 12 minutes to go to the bathroom and come back. What are they doing during that time? Well, generally they're stopping at every single location, talking to everybody, chatting with them, sharing with them. They're doing everything but their job. Now, another aspect that we see within the socialite, and I kind of group them in, it's kind of a slacker socialite thing, is that they will figure out ways to look like they're working, but not work, right? Yeah, they find those things within your organization in which they can pretend to be working. Because from the police officer side, we used to see this a lot, is that an employee, officers would be sent to a call for service, and one of the officers would be on the radio telling them all kinds of information out of the CAD RMS system. I looked this up, and this is the last time I went to this call, and these are the people that were there. And he's providing a ton of information. And so if you're just listening to the radio, you think, oh, this guy he's a hard worker. He's really helping out. Except that he's not going to that call. He's doing this like sitting in his car drinking coffee, knowing that he seems like he's working without working. And in the dispatch center, we see the same thing. If you have anything within there, that dispatch center where somebody spends a whole lot of time looking like they're working, but the reality is not doing anything, that's the socialite. That's the socialite. These guys will plan, they'll like to plan things, they'll like to plan parties, and they'll like to just share all the information, which means they love to gossip. The rumors and the gossiping all start with the socialite, right? And so they are constantly working within that world of spreading those rumors, telling those stories, and again, wasting their time and wasting everybody else's time.
And just like the martyr, right? I mean, these are probably personality traits. It's just taking too far.
I think that's a perfect way to put it, right? You're looking at there are certain personality traits that are getting, they're getting enhanced because of things going on. How does the person become a martyr at work? Well, they look around at everybody else and they feel like they're incompetent. And maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But they feel like that. How does the socialite feels like this is where they're going to have fun. This is where their friends are. This is where they're going to have a good time during the day. And that just gets built on and enhanced until it becomes a huge problem, because they have no focus, right? They have lack of focus for the day. They're not keeping track or paying attention to what they should be paying attention to. They typically seem to be very immature when it comes to work. Their ability to take that playtime, if you will, and put it where it's appropriate, and then it's time to go to work. They often forget that it's time to go to work. This builds a huge unprofessional effect within the agency of the organization, and it seeps into everybody else working, all the other consoles that are there. All of a sudden, you get, instead of the 3 or 4 people that are doing the jobs they're supposed to be doing, they're all gossiping and chatting and talking and not paying attention and not actually doing the things that they're supposed to do. The other thing about the socialite is you might as well, the big, how you make butter, right? That big churn paddle, right? It's got the little holes in it, right? You steer. the thing about the socialite, you might as well give them one of those big paddles, because they just stir shit within your organization. They just cause trouble. They love to get people mad at each other. They love to sit back and watch where the sparks fly because they think that's cool. If you have two dispatchers that hate each other and doing nothing but arguing all the time, I will almost guarantee that there was a socialite standing in the corner making that happen, because they absolutely love it.
There's, I mean, I can picture it perfectly. I think as other people there, like it's hard to resist. It's hard to resist the socialite.
Yeah, they're sometimes they're funny, they're engaging, they're entertaining, and you want to break from this toxic environment that you're in, and the phone's ringing, and you want to break from that, and this person offers that break. So yeah, I'll spend a few minutes. I mean, come on, what's the big deal? And then all of a sudden you realize the problems that you've had.
You lose track of the time, for sure.
Now, you talk about managing the socialite and making sure that the socialite is doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. As a supervisor, you got to pay attention. You really do, because if you become part of this, because remember, you're going to be a target of the socialite. They're going to want to do this with you as well. But you have to pay attention and regular redirection, keeping them back to work. The occasional walking through the office, trying to make sure everybody's doing the jobs they're supposed to be doing, I think are important. If you have the opportunity, if you've got I've seen some dispatch centers will have little overlaps where they can do, I don't want to call it a roll call because that's not what they're doing, but they discuss, goals or things like that for the next coming day. If you have something like that set up, that's a great time to have a little bit of social time for them before everybody hits the consoles and starts working. Recognize defining those things. The other thing is being very clear about appropriate behavior, whether it's your policy manuals, when somebody moves into the world of inappropriate behavior, inappropriate comments, I call it the just Bob syndrome. It's just Bob, right? When somebody does or says something inappropriate, then it's just Bob. Now, yeah, it's just Bob. That's what Bob does. It's just Bob. What are you going to do about it? It's just Bob. Well, you have to deal with, you can't just say it's just Bob, because just Bob then kind of infects everybody else. So you have to deal with that appropriate behavior. Somebody says something or does something, posts a picture on the bulletin board or sends an email out that's inappropriate. You want to make sure that you're calling those people and you're addressing that immediately and not letting that continue. The other thing, though, and this is an important thing about the socialite, you know what? They are good communicators. They tend to be really good at talking, at interacting with people, at getting people to do things. And so harness that, use that, get them into, maybe start looking at, I know this is going to sound crazy, but maybe start looking at utilizing them for some training. Whether you're utilizing, and what I love to use these kinds of socialites for from a training standpoint is the role player. Right. When you're creating these role-playing scenarios for your dispatch center, and you've gotten, the live person is calling on the phone, the live role player is calling on the phone, and then your call taker has to take that and work through it. The socialite makes a perfect role player here, because they have no problem just, to chatting, getting somebody off topic. And so you can really utilize that skills from a training standpoint. And then you come back to them and you're like, hey, you're great at this training stuff. You're very helpful here. I really like it. Once you start channeling them and getting them to do the job, I'm redirecting them. I'm making sure they understand the importance of the job. I'm giving them opportunities for them to be social, because as we said before, this is probably their normal, personality anyway. It just got so enhanced to where it was tearing down everybody else within the team. So what we want to do is use that, but get it to where it's working within the organization. And again, harnessing that, encouraging that, putting them actually in some positions you might not think of to start with, to just get them involved. Once they start getting ownership in what's going on there, you really start seeing a change. And then the socialite can really become a good method of change, right? Getting someone who can spread your message so well within the organization and at that worker level can be really helpful.
Oh, I like it. Channeling it. That's a good way to think about it. All right, one other type we're going to talk about here. The bullies.
Yeah, the bullies. The bullies are an interesting one too. And of course, again, what a great one. I don't always lie, cheat, gaslight, and ruin your life, but when I do, it's your fault.
All your fault.
The bully. So The bully is exactly what you would think. Now, we actually, when we start talking about leadership, organization, and management, you'll actually sometimes hear the bully called the psychopath. And I don't like to use it in public safety terms because it has a very specific connotation, but I can see where they're talking about. This is the person that poisons the entire atmosphere. They do create hostile work environments. They are disruptive. They are angry. They are rude, and they use their position, and they use their authority to really cause havoc, not only within your own organization, but outside it as well. And when you have an organization like Central Dispatch, in which you really are the first contact that most people will be having with the public safety system, with emergency management, you are that customer facing role, right? And when the bully is the one answering the phones, that it's completely detrimental to absolutely everything. You're looking at bullying behavior, disregarding protocol. This is the person that goes, well, that's just stupid, I'm not doing that. Right? You got a new policy in this. That's stupid. I'm not going to do that. You'll tend to see that out of the bully. They have real issues with authority. And I talked about the other ones tended to make friends with the bosses, and that's building those relationships, while many of the other types and traits of the toxic employee become friends or try to get friendly with the bosses, not the bully. The bully is that puts the fear in the boss. The bully is the one that says, he's the one with the attorney's card in his pocket. Right. And whenever you call him in to do an evaluation, he just lays the attorney's card on there. This is the one that he's very familiar with how to file complaints against the agency. He loves to file complaints against his own agency because the more complaints he files, if he can ever get any of those to stick, then he feels untouchable because he'll just say it's malicious when you're coming back at him. So the bully really has difficulty with time with authority. They do not get along with anybody in there, and they are constantly manipulating and sabotaging things. And while you don't necessarily think that somebody would do this, these are the people that unplug phones. These are the people that are going to intentionally spill drinks on the console. They'll intentionally do those kinds of things to cause breakages, to cause breakdowns, to cause problems in the system. And you're like, why would anybody do this? Well, that's the bully. Now, how did they get here? How did we allow a bully into the system? That's interesting, because a lot of times it didn't start that way. Many times the bully came in with such good intentions, but maybe they got in trouble a couple of times. Maybe they feel like they were treated unfairly by the bosses. Maybe they feel like their position at the department is unfair. And this is about getting back at everyone, getting back at the bosses, and getting back at the other employees. And many times these are just miserable people at every single level. Now, how do you deal with the bully? So one of the things when we talked about in all the other ones, whether, like I said, we've talked specifically about the martyr and we've talked specifically about the socialite. We didn't touch the slacker or the hot mess too much, but in all four of those, there are ways to fix it. The bully, you get rid of them. This is the one you fire. And if you look at these, how to manage the bully kind of bullet points here, very little of these have anything to do with making him better. These are about documenting ways in which you can get rid of them. And this is where documentation becomes huge. Court case Whitley versus Warden that said if it's not written down, it didn't happen, which means you've got to document the information. Paper the heck out of the bully. Write paper on this guy. This is the person that you need to, when an employee comes and complains about him, you need to follow it up. You need to write it up. You have a duty as a supervisor to provide a safe and supportive environment. That is a duty. People have a right to have a safe and supportive environment in the workplace, and so you have to provide that. Which means that when you have identified this bully within your organization, take those employee complaints seriously. When somebody says, "I just saw Jim pour an entire Coke on the console," don't go, "He wouldn't do that. Nobody would do that." Take it seriously. Take a look at it. If you have cameras, if you have a way to double check that, take a look at it and see what's going on there. But take the employee complaints seriously. And then You should have anti-bullying policies. You should have lots of policies in place. And if you don't go to your HR, I guarantee that your HR for your city or your county, your jurisdiction has these types of anti-bullying policies. Arm yourself with them and make sure you're enforcing those. And ultimately, trust your instincts. I mean, trust your instincts. You have a pretty good idea what's working and what isn't working within that dispatch center. And when you see that this person is causing trouble, trust your instincts. Even if you're not necessarily getting all of the information, go find the information. And at the end of the day, document. Whether you have performance evaluations, which I feel very strongly that your agency should. I know a lot of agencies are like, oh, I don't want to do them or they're trouble, but utilize those performance evaluations to document their performance. Utilize the complaint system.
Agency 360's performance evaluation. You don't have to do paper. You don't have to document all this on paper.
The Agency 360 does this? Is that what you're saying, Matt?
I was just saying, it doesn't have to all be on paper.
Well, of course, paper is a euphemism for proper documentation, right? I mean, so utilizing a program like Agency 360 would be wonderful to document all this stuff. But again, you've got to document it. And like I said, when I use paper, I mean, seriously, it was as euphemism for whatever it is that you're doing to document this information, to have it stored and save it. And you need to do this at some level for most of the toxic employees. Because again, documentation is going to be important because they can move through these toxic, right? You can have a toxic employee, you have the one walk in the door and he's the hard worker. That quickly becomes the martyr because he feels like he's the only one doing all the work. And so, and then maybe he gets in trouble for something, trying to do the right thing, but he screwed something up. And all of a sudden he gets written up and gets hammered over a policy that he feels wasn't very fair. Well, pretty soon you see him move into the bully. If you documented or dealt with those issues earlier, you might have been able to save them before they got this far. But as I said before, once you get into that bully, like I said, a lot of places call them psychopath for a reason. You got to get rid of these. These are your toxic employees that are so devastating. These will run people out of your dispatch center. And if you're sitting back and you're not seeing the day-to-day functions of your dispatch center, but you can't keep a dispatch on night shift for more than 3 weeks, except for the one guy that's been there for 13 years. Let's go look at the one guy that's been there for 13 years. Why is everybody leaving in 3 weeks? And if you talk to them, and it could be something totally different, but if you talk to the new employees and they start talking about problems with that person, you may want to do some real good investigation to see what kind of work environment's going on there.
That's a good point. All right, we'll take a little break there. So we talked about 3 types, and we've got the martyr, the socialite, the bully. And another giveaway: $25 Amazon gift card if you email support@agency360.com. Which type have you come across the most in your professional career so far? I'm trying to think of that. Probably the socialite for me. I think the socialites. I don't know. That's a tough call.
Well, of the one I didn't talk about, the hot mess, that's the one I see the most.
We're talking about the 3 that we've talked about so far.
The 3 we talked about so far, probably. So you don't see bullies very often, thank goodness. Because when you do, they're so bad. But I see a lot of the martyr. I really do. Actually, I'm going to go back and say I see a lot of the martyr.
I think you're right. I could go with the martyr too. But put that in an email since you already got it open and win $25. We'll be announcing the winners March 1st. So even if you're seeing this on a replay, you can still submit up until March 1st. All right. So now we've gone through those 3 types. We've got a couple questions, kind of Q&A a little bit here, recorded Q&A. But first question I kind of had, and I guess as we were brainstorming this topic, is what happens when this toxic employee is your peer?
Well, generally, it's going to be your peer, right? I mean, that's generally is when it's going to be. And I love prioritize your self-care. I mean, honestly, I think that's number one, is that working in public safety is it's a difficult job. It takes special people to do this. It takes people that can function in a toxic environment, that can be critical thinkers, and we tend to be the people that, the term we charge to the sound of the gunfire. But that's just the police. I mean, firemen run into those burning buildings, and dispatchers have to send their loved ones into those places, sitting back and watching or listening to all of this unfold, someplace else. And we're all such control freaks. That's really hard to do. You've got to be a special person. And oftentimes because of that, we feel like we're supposed to suffer in some way. Well, you're not. You're absolutely not supposed to suffer. That's not the way this works. So prioritize your self-care. If that situation is uncomfortable, if that situation is difficult, if that situation is harming you in any way, you have got to report that. Going up through the proper chain of command, utilizing your policies and practices there at your agency. Where's your dispatch supervisor? Who do you go to next? And push that. If your original supervisor says, don't worry about that, then say, well, I need to go to the next level, and make that happen. Move all the way to whether it be your agency's HR, human resources department, or where. But it's very important to follow through and push that where it needs to go to keep you safe. And then don't stoop to their level. I mean, you're going to lead by example, and you have to make sure that you're not doing the same things that they're doing. So recognize that you need to up your own game. You need to make sure that you are performing at a high level. You're going to lead by example, and sometimes, and I've found this to be true, sometimes particularly these toxic employees that are just getting into that portion of whether it be their career or their personalities of toxicity. Sometimes if you've been around for a while, you'll have some power too. I've had candid conversations. I pulled a guy aside and I've said, you know what, this is going to stop, because if it doesn't, then I'm going to have to do more. But what you're doing, and here's all the reasons, and here's the problems. And I don't know if you want to be here or not, but I don't want you here. And pretty soon they'll be like, you know what, you're right. And I've had some guys make some good turnarounds, because just sit down and having candid conversations with them and explaining what the expectations were and where they were going to go as a peer. I've done that. But if you're not comfortable with that, you don't necessarily have to. It's not your job as a peer to do this. That's your supervisor's job. So make sure you're properly reporting it.
And if you were to have that conversation, you probably do that in private, just like a supervisor. Right? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. That's not the thing you have, in the break room while everybody's standing there listening. Yeah.
And how would you? I mean, just brainstorming here. Like, you're in that position, how would you approach that employee? Like, hey, I've got something I want to talk to you about in private.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it depends a little bit on your own personality, right? But generally, it's like, we got to talk. I need a few minutes of your time, and lay it out for them. I mean, that's the thing but again, this is more my personality, is kind of an upfront. I'm about as anti-passive aggressive as you can get. So I have a tendency to say, this is my problem. We need to discuss this, again, in a nice private setting, and reasonable. I mean, I'm not going to do that when I'm angry, right? If I'm mad at them, I'm not going to say, we need to talk right now, because then I'm going to say things that aren't appropriate, and I'm not going to handle the situation well. So I have to make sure that I'm not angry, that I'm not letting my emotions or temper lead this conversation, but facts lead the conversation. And that's how I would do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, the good news is, maybe we hinted at it when we talked about documenting, is agency.
We did, Matt. I have a question for you, Matt. We talk so much about documenting. Is there a process? Is there a program out there? Is there something that actually helps us document these issues?
Holy cow, Steve, you read my mind. Yeah. So we've got, first off, we've got an onboarding tool. When you talk about the CTO program, and it doesn't even have to be CTOs. You can use our tool for onboarding new supervisors, any role, the different consoles at the dispatch center. It's important to set those first impressions right and set those expectations right. Because if you tolerate that bad behavior in the beginning, then instantly that's going to be the norm from there on out. So get that first impression, get that intro to the organization down right. And then after that, what happens? We finish with our CTO program, and then they're on their own. And to try and prevent that, we've also created a performance evaluation tool, where you can document performance evaluations, you can document incidents. But more than that, I think, as Steve kind of hinted with those toxic employees, a lot of this relates to burnout and people getting frustrated and fed up. And maybe it's because they don't feel like they're reaching their goals. They don't feel like the organization is supporting them in their goals. And one of the things we can do here in our kind of performance evaluation tool is track that employee's goals and make it transparent throughout the entire organization, so that if you see someone that wants to do something or has an interest in something, instead of passing them up or just not realizing it and giving it to somebody else, you'll be able to see that and make sure you're taking care of them.
Now, can you use this as an early warning system?
You could, yeah. So if we can create little different alerts depending on the incidents, and and what we want to do is document those incidents when they happen, instead of waiting till the end of the evaluation, for example. And I think we've all had it, right? The evaluation, everything the supervisor writes is something that happened in the last 2 weeks.
Right, especially when you're looking at evaluation for once a year, right?
Yeah. It's like, it's been it's a whole 12-month period, but everything you say here is something in the last 2 weeks. So with the Agency 360 performance evaluation program, you can document those incidents as they happen. We make it really easy to enter activities and incidents and that kind of stuff, so that when you go to do the evaluation, all of that is pulled over, and you're looking at the entire year's performance instead of just trying to remember what happened in the last 2 or 3 weeks. All right, and again, you can better manage your employees, develop skills, and communicate those clear expectations. All right, you can obviously reach out to us at Agency 360, sales at agency360.com. You've already maybe written support, so just change that to sales, and then we can talk to you more about how all of that works. And one last giveaway: how are performance appraisals currently done at your agency?
And if they're not?
If they're not, they say that. Yeah, a lot of people aren't. They just don't have time.
And the performance appraisals can be extremely helpful if done right. And I like Agency 360, I think, does a wonderful job of giving you the tools to do them right.
Yeah. For us, it's not, I mean, you remember at the department, right? It's January, and like, oh gosh, I got to do 8 performance evaluations. It's like a box you check. Like, hurry up, get it done, check that box and be done, and move on to the next thing that you're worried about. And they're intense. They take a lot of work. Well, if we can make that easier, then we can help you do this in a more meaningful way, where the employee actually gets something out of it, and can grow, which is what we all want to do. We want to be challenged. We want to grow. We want to become better versions of ourselves.
So send that email when it's open.
Yeah. All right. And then looks like we're getting a little echo here all of a sudden. But to learn more about Steve,
check out the Blue Canary podcast. Check out the Blue Canary podcast. Something that I've been doing, I really enjoy. Anywhere you find podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it, you can find Blue Canary podcast. Just check for Blue Canary, and it's where we try to let cops tell cop stories.
That's awesome, especially like the episode 9 recently, where you interviewed the police officer wives.
Had a fantastic episode. Really, really love that one. If you're looking for just one to jump in, I would say try that. Give that one a go. I think you're going to really like that. I know it was emotional and it was very emotional program, and one that I probably my favorite.
It was great. And then Agency 362, we're here to support you. Sales at agency360.com. Go to our website, get a cost calculator, look at case studies, and that's it.